All right. I've started the recording. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Pollack, and I chair the Moderators Committee on Exterior Lighting or Outdoor Lighting. And the committee is almost completely present. I'm joined by committee members David Trevette, Elisa Plazanja, Bill Heineman, Matt Hyatt, Julie Jetty, Ariel Seufer. Who am I missing?
Michael is a
Yes, Michael Kirstein. Thank you. And maybe we won't see Pat. And that's everybody. Matt, David, Bill, Alyssa, Michael, another David, Julie, Ariel. This is a public hearing and we will take public comment. This is maybe our 7th meeting or something like that, approximately. Pat is here. Great. So we are all present. We are, let me ask, is there a committee member who's willing to produce the minutes, draft the minutes for this meeting? Anybody want to step up? You
I'll
can.
do it. I can do it.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, and I will send you all the links and everything after the meeting. There's also, and for many years of post-COVID Zoom.gov, we didn't have these pretty good AI summaries, but now Kate McGillivray from Town Hall sends them over to me, and they're pithy. They're not bad for a reference, and then we have the transcript and the video link. So we are working from now. We've met and we've reviewed the draft bylaw in several kind of formats. It was just called a working paper in the first couple of versions. Since the second version, I put it into bylaw format, and I took out most of the commentary so that we could kind of try to get our work done. I'm not 100% confident that we can wrap this up in time to submit it to the warrant, but I'm very hopeful. And I don't know that there's a reason why we couldn't do that. This is a 2-day public hearing, if you will. We'll get as far as we can today, and then we'll reconvene tomorrow. I set that up both because I figured we had a lot of work to do, and also to give both the public and staff opportunities if they had conflicting meetings to, or commitments to come join us. Speaking of staff, I see that we're joined by Alexandra Vecchio, the Director of Sustainability, and by Kevin Johnson. And Kevin, I apologize, I don't know your title, but one of the higher ups in Department of Public Works, Deputy Director or something, a Deputy Commissioner, is that what you are?
Yeah, Deputy Commissioner of Operations for Public Works and Highway and Sanitation Director.
Okay, right. And a long time employee of, leader in the town. And by Joe Callanan, Town Council.
David, I'd just like to mention that we have Will Smith, one of our engineering staff, present as well.
Okay, great. And people keep coming in, I keep admitting them. And Elisa, while I'm thinking of it, where did you go? Everybody's jumping.
All right, I'm here. I just had.
Oh, there you are. Thank you. I'm going to make you a co-host so that you can screen share.
Okay.
So when we get to working through edits and discussion, Elisa's going to screen share and do what I did last time and edit in real time on the screen while I sort of run things. And I think that should help us so that I'm not doing both. I think that's going to be a lot smoother. But this is a public hearing. Now, often when I hold public hearings, I hold some discussion first in order to inform the public for their, in advance of their comments. But we've published a lot of materials, we've met a lot of times, and my inclination is to at least start. We could open it up again for public comment, perhaps, but just to start by taking public comment at the front end of the meeting. And then after that, I also think rather than working our way methodically from the beginning towards the end of the draft, it may make sense to just jump right to some of Public Works concerns and dig into those, but I would be interested when we get there in other committee members' thoughts on that.
I agree.
Okay.
Take the time to join us. I think we should give them the floor early and let them go on with their day. They've been working all day.
Exactly. Great. Okay. So what I'd like to do, I'll start. You can use the raise hand function in Zoom. Any members of the public who'd like to just offer public comment. And to those of you who submitted written public comments, I believe all of those should have been published in the agenda packet for this meeting. So those are already in the record and they've been shared with the committee. Janice, please come forward and make your public comment. Are you
Thank you.
muted?
Yep.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Chair Pollack. So I just wanted to relate an experience. So last night I left a meeting at 9 o'clock from town hall and found myself stepping into total darkness. There had been a power failure. So I felt the stillness, the quiet, and most of all, I looked up in the sky and I saw this beautiful moon that was just stunning. And it makes me realize how important the work that you're all doing really is to our quality of life. And so I'm mainly here to listen. I read the materials. You've clearly been doing a lot of work, but I'm also here to cheer you on. You're doing very important work. So thank you.
Thank you. Benedict Hallowell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Town meeting member of precinct 15, Lars Anderson Park board member, and lover of nature. And I just want to say that in all of these various discussions of big lights that are going to go up, but possibly go up on Putterham Fields and various things, I want everybody to consider the Dexter Southfield lights up high there. Those tower lights that you must all drive by at some point in the evenings in Brookline. Those are a good way to see what big stadium lights look like, and it gives you a great indication of how it affects the neighbors, the animals, and everything. And a lot of people don't seem to have noticed them, but off of Lee and Newton Street by Allendale Farm up high. And I just want to say that I used to live next to Zavarian Brothers, and I would have stayed in Westwood and not been part of Brookline if it weren't for their lights that they put up. And it just absolutely changed the whole nature of the back end of Westwood. So we used to say to people, we'd like to see the moon lit up by or the night lit up by the moon. And we weren't able to keep them down, and just wanted to say, please be careful and consider the animals, the nature, kids going to sleep, etc.
Thank you. The floor is open to any others who would like to make public comment. Okay, I will probably ask again later in the meeting, and if other people want to make public comment, and there may be people who really want to make public comment on specific issues as we debate them, and we'll see about, I don't want to have we're not expanding the committee membership in terms of the discussion, but I do think that we can probably accommodate people who wish to speak. It's nice to have so many people joining us. We've been relatively running solo as a committee all for the last 7 months. Had a couple of visitors. I think other than staff, 2, I think, so far in previous meetings. All right. So Elisa, why don't you go ahead and share the working document, the draft, whatever. It's got a long title by now.
All right, hold on. That's a lot of pressure. Like I usually manage to mess this up. I'm gonna share.
Yeah,
Come on.
share a window, not your screen. It usually works better.
Yep.
It fills up the
Here we
screen.
go. I believe. Can everyone see this?
Give us a sec. Yep,
Yep.
perfect.
All right.
All right. So maybe what we'll do is let's just do a quick, and Elisa, if you want to give my voice a rest or whatever, can you do a 2-minute overview scrolling through of just describing what is before us that we plan on submitting to town hall? Just mention each heading and then kind of generally what it's for, or, however you want to do it.
Okay, sure. So we have our statement of purpose, which sort of defines like why are we pursuing this this warrant article or this bylaw, and then this is new. David, did you have a question or comment?
I was just going to say, for the purpose of people who might have missed this in the posted materials, we are proposing both modifications to the zoning bylaw, but our major focus has been this general bylaw. Okay, so this is what we're talking about tonight, is a general bylaw.
Thank you, David. That's actually probably worth expanding on a little bit in case because there was a lot of discussion during warrant article 8 back in the previous fall town meeting that about glare and light trespass, and that is regulated under the had been regulated under zoning, and the companion piece to this will be to return the lighting bylaw in zoning that was most likely inadvertently eliminated, which focuses on glare and light trespass. And then this is really, so that's kind of a consequence of lighting, whereas this warrant article focuses more on controlling the inputs and will be a general bylaw.
Let me just say, why don't you scroll up? We could just mention, so Elisa has integrated the comments from many members of both staff and the public. Prior to my putting, as I put this document together, I actually integrated comments from town council, who's with us, Joe Callanan. I didn't send out his memo to all of the, publish it, because it was mostly correcting poor grammatical construction for law. For instance, in putting this together, we or I had used a lot of parentheses that were inappropriate for law. And he just sort of sorted that in a simple way. And I didn't even point that out because didn't change the meaning at all. And so the town council did not make any comments about content. He simply was trying to keep us making good law. And in that light, he would like to see us include this sentence that clarifies that this does not regulate what's in the zoning bylaw, which is the regulation of light trespass and glare. And it just says, if you want to know about those, they're in zoning. And so I think we need to just discuss that and decide if we want to adopt it. We can do it later when we get back to it. I pressed him on it. I thought, is it necessary? Is it redundant? Do we have to say it? He can speak for himself on why he thinks that we're better off. I assume it's to, make this more defensible in land court if it ever were challenged. But that's my assumption. So back to you, Elisa.
Yeah, sure. So you're touching on, in general, if anyone looked at the document, items that are in red are for discussion because the whole document's for discussion, but items in red are, sort of new or still open items. So you'll notice that town council's comment or a suggested addition is in red. There are other things that are in red as we go through this. So we have our statement of purpose, which outlines what we hope that this bylaw will address. And then new, but not highlighted in red, so I guess I'm already contradicting myself, is this next section on guiding principles, which the chair suggested that we incorporate, so we can go through that, but sort of a framework for everything else that follows aligns with these guiding principles. We have definitions of
and also the guiding principles are not, we didn't write them. They came from Dark Sky USA or something like that.
Yeah, Dark Sky, and actually they're joint principles of Dark Sky one of the Dark Sky organizations and the Illuminating Engineer Society.
Thank you.
So then we have our definitions, which obviously are very important, and then applicability. So where does this, when does this bylaw apply? And let's see, and then the requirements. So this is the next section. You can see there's a lot of footnotes in here. There's a lot of comments. That what this bylaw is actually setting out in terms of regulating. So we've got that section, and then we also have a section that follows on exemptions, I believe is the next section. Except, well, there's some exceptions, prohibition, so specifically outright these things you can't do, and then there's a list of exemptions, so things that are carved out of the bylaw, like emergency lighting and so on. And then we have enforcement, which is going to be a topic of discussion. As you can see, that most of that is new. Something that we've been wrestling with is what's the right approach to enforcement, and then your all-purpose severability provision. And the balance of this document, if anyone looked at this consolidated document, I did insert comments that were submitted that didn't fit within a particular category that might be more general comments, like Jocelyn submitted some reference material. Ira Krepkin had submitted a nice diagram that illustrates shielded lighting and so on. So if people want to look at these, and I have a slightly newer version than what was distributed because there were some comments that came in a little bit late. So from Jane Flanagan and Debbie, whose name I will not butcher, I'll just say Debbie H. And then Fran Perler had also submitted comments. So that's the document overall. And I'll take us back to the beginning. And let me know if especially when we get to the footnotes, if people need me to enlarge the text further, because the footnotes are in slightly smaller font, let me know that.
Okay, I think if we're going to address, DPW and engineering's concerns, we still kind of have to crawl through the footnotes where they're all listed and kind of take them in order, right?
Right.
So you can keep going and maybe just read the footnote comments, and then we can socialize them and have our own discussion, and also open up the floor to to staff or others, to Kevin.
David, do you want to do all the footnotes or just the ones that are from DPW?
I think let's focus on DPW.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think we can get to Jenny Rate's comments, but go ahead and read, for instance, read footnotes 2 for us.
Yep. Yeah. So Commissioner Shute had, this was just a general comment that she had submitted in, along with some more specific comments, which will be coming up, that DPW does support the overall objectives of this proposed bylaw, but they are recommending that the proposal be revised to provide a clearer municipal exemption. So DPW is basically asking that they be carved out of this bylaw. So clearer municipal exemption and workable standards for public infrastructure, appropriate recognition of state and federal authority, and a practical phased approach to existing town lighting, and a clearly defined enforcement structure. So that really kind of hits on the issues that both Commissioner Shute and also Tim Davis had highlighted related to enforcement, and Commissioner Shute in particular has other concerns, which we will get to as we scroll through. So Tim Davis had asked that one of our larger open items relates to lighting for athletic fields. And so Tim Davis had submitted a sort of broader comment about his belief that outdoor recreational facilities and sports and athletic field lighting are not defined. So he's concerned that, whether there's sufficient clarity in those terms, or would they cover things like tennis and pickleball courts, basketball courts, outdoor skating rinks, golf driving ranges and practice areas, swimming pools, skate parks, sledding or cross-country skiing areas, recreational paths and trailheads, bleachers, dugouts, scoreboards, concession areas, and other similar facilities, because he thought that a narrow interpretation might cover only conventional rectangular and diamond athletic fields.
Right, so let me interrupt, chair's prerogative, I guess. I thought about this, and I also looked back at the recommended practice 6 document that the ANSI and IES, that we're now referencing in the, at least that's for discussion. And it's called Recommended Practice Lighting Sports and Recreational Areas. And so I think that rather than, sports fields or athletic fields or anything else, we should take that term, sports and recreational areas. I think it's a great term, and I think I personally, I'm comfortable if we simply address sports and recreational areas, that we don't have the ambiguity about pickleball courts or anything else. I think it covers playgrounds. I think it covers fields, it doesn't cover, well, I don't know what it doesn't cover, but sports and recreational areas, I think perhaps we don't need a definition, and we could feel comfortable that, using that rather than standardizing the language, but I would be interested in other people's points of view.
Bill has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Matt, were you saying something?
I said Bill has his hand up.
Oh, Bill.
Thanks. So I think the wording that you're proposing makes sense to generalize a little bit. Somewhere in the correspondence, somebody raised the question about, are we talking about only about town-owned recreational facilities? And so I gather that we are really intending, regardless of who owns it, that this applies.
I would say that's how I would read the document. Alexandra.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Alexandra Vecchio. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources for the town of Brookline. This may not be the right point to ask this question, and if so, I'm happy to hold it, David, but interested in the sports and recreational areas, if that would be inclusive of passive recreation. And so by that, we are typically referring to parks that people are walking in and still recreating in, but don't have an active recreational use like a field or a court.
It's your question really operates at 2 levels. One is, what is the moderator's committee's intent at this point? And then the other is, how would the enforcement officer, whoever that ends up being, interpret the document? Because ultimately, if it becomes law, then it's somebody has to read it and say, well, this does include passive parks with walking, because that's recreating. So I think there's in the document, it just, if we were to use the term from RP6, sports and recreational areas, it probably is inclusive. I think that document runs to 90 or 100 pages or something, and has many, many, many subsections, including pickleball.
Okay, thank you.
But would it, if I may ask a question, would it include, passive which I think was one of Tim's questions. He said, like trailheads. Yeah, he had recreation paths and trailheads. I don't remember off the top of my head whether our RP6 covers, just more general park. I think its focus is more on active recreation. And so the only reason that I'm bringing this up is because later we say that not to get into, I'll still call it athletic field lighting, but we're referencing that document and saying that they should follow the practices within that document. And so if there are no standards in there for passive recreation, which I don't think there are, then you could either say, okay, it's not addressed, so you're fine. But if we're going to carve out if we're going to have different standards for, uh, uh, for, let's call it athletic fields, right? So I think, Matt, you had, made us aware that, as Tim Davis does later, that athletic fields typically require a higher correlated color temperature for safety reasons. So if we're going to have one blanket provision for sports and recreational areas, then by default, are we saying that it's okay to have these like brighter or whiter lights in parks, which I don't think we want? So maybe we could just park it as a question. Do we need to specify active?
Yeah,
Just
it's a good
according to
question.
a quick
And
Google search, RP6 does not include passive.
yeah, I just did a quick actual search of the table of contents of RP6, and it does not include passive, right? So,
So maybe we should
right.
say active sports and active recreation.
Maybe. I mean, again, it would be nicer if we didn't have to, invent, but you're absolutely right. Okay, I think we understand this question. We have not resolved it, and we should move along. Is that agreeable? Oh, William Smith, would you like to make a comment?
I was just going to further Alexandra's question, and I'm thinking about shared use paths, which are bicycle, pedestrian, skateboards, scooters.
Yeah, and we'll get to
we
that.
do. Okay.
Oh, there's another whole piece of this, which is about street lighting.
Well,
And
these aren't streets.
no, I
I'm talking
understand,
about
but the DPW has asked the same question about
Okay.
other paved pathways that might not be called streets, and how does the bylaw relate to those? So your question is well taken and not clearly addressed.
Does provide a list of sports and activities that it includes. So I think by reference, we're covered. Skateboarding is not there. Rollerblading is not there. Walking your dog is not there. So it's very much team sports, although they do have horseshoe pitching.
Yay.
Okay, why don't we move on? Let's keep going.
Okay, so that's let's see what else comes up. Okay, so Tim Davis again, this relates to the implementation timelines. So he notes that the 1 and 5 year timelines are of concern because of the potential basically for an unfunded mandate. So, this would cause, to the extent that, lighting fixtures need to be replaced, there would be associated expense. And Tim explained that sports lighting systems can involve poles, electrical infrastructure, controls, engineering, photometric studies, and possible design review, committee review, not simply the replacement of light bulbs. So a blanket 5-year deadline could result in substantial capital costs that have not been evaluated or programmed. He noted that the bylaw also accelerates compliance to 1 year when more than 25% of a lighting system is replaced. And he said routine phased maintenance, storm damage, or the failure of several fixtures could therefore trigger the replacement of an entire field lighting system. For example, if one pole goes down at the outdoor ice rink, that represents 25% of the system. So if this were to be voted on as is without funding, then the town might find itself out of compliance for lack of funds to pay for the replacement lighting. And he's asking, if this case, would the town then be fined, and would the town pay the fine to itself? It's so Commissioner Shute also at the end has provided a discussion about estimated costs, so we'll get to that. The impact obviously on budgeting,
Well, I'd like to hear from if any members of the committee would like to reflect on, this idea of the 1 year and 5 year as it relates to, these sort of significant town systems, if they have any thoughts.
So I have a thought which may be like completely impractical. Which is, could we, for municipal things, could we say, could we make it contingent on funding? And, I mean, I guess that's sort of a way for the town to kind of get out of everything, because if the town is never, if there's never funding allocated for compliance, then they would just, nothing would ever happen. But from a practical perspective, if there isn't funding allocated, it's not going to be possible to do this either. So that was one thought that I had about, is there a way to tweak the wording so that for the town, it would be contingent on funding? And maybe
We
you
could, oh, sorry.
And I guess my question, could it then be, could you add on to that and say, which, I don't know if you can mandate in a bylaw that then town meeting absolutely has to allocate funds, but could you put some kind of time limit on it and say,
You cannot do that.
okay, sorry, okay.
No, you can't encumber a future town meeting.
Okay,
It's
got
not
it.
something you can do. Michael and then David.
Yeah, I would not like to see a situation where town government is allowed to do one thing and the normal resident has to do something else. Now, I think that doesn't apply to our roads and our public services. So I would be certainly comfortable having a carve out for the municipal part, but I think buildings should be in whatever we decide is going to be for the residents, and town sporting and roads and everything else. I think we could give a 10-year, up to 10 years. Has to be changed within 10 years.
David Trevette.
Just to remind us that we have language with regard to streetlights about that as they are replaced, they should try to come into compliance. And we might make further use of that language that apply to things other than streetlights. I would just make that comment.
Ariel.
I have a similar comment to Michael's, perhaps with a slightly different spin, which is my sense is similar to what Michael said. There is a lack of justice if we're saying that there's one standard for the town and a different for everyone else. I think we can't obligate the town, as you said, David. So I don't think we can put a hard 10-year deadline in any event. I think the answer is, if the town is going to pass this bylaw, the town also has to decide to pass the funding. Until the town decides to pass the funding to make this effective, I don't think it should apply to ordinary residents either. And I think that's one way to make it, to create some justice between the town and the residents.
Right. This bylaw, I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with this bylaw obligating the town to comply and change its lighting. What the bylaw can't do is tell a future town meeting that it has to vote the money.
Right. But that amounts to the same thing, because if the town doesn't obligate the money, then if town meeting doesn't obligate the money, then the town isn't going to comply.
Well, right, but then the town is out, but then the town is out of compliance. And the question of how it finds itself is whatever.
It's an infinite money loop.
Yeah, exactly. You could just make it go higher and higher and put it back in the general fund. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I have the same feeling that as a point of principle, the town should lead by example. And so what we're trying to, what I'd like to accomplish here is addressing, clear flaws, and trying to make sure we understand both staff's concerns but also, and we can't necessarily do that right now, what the true vulnerability is, like where, okay, so there's 2 fields that are currently lit. Any other fields that might be lit in the future that are town owned could be with compliant, shielded lighting. And to what extent, it'd be interesting to know to what extent the existing lighting actually, is or isn't compliant with what's in the recommended practice document. Is there a problem with it? I also, I also think that 5 years does seem short for like major systems, like a whole field lighting. And so then we could think about how to maybe create some space around that while still being equitable and not creating a totally separate rule for the town and for the residents and for the businesses, which I think we also want to try to, the whole gist of this is what we're bringing forward. And this is, I'm speaking to our guests because I've said this repeatedly. At least my way of understanding it is something that is both broad in that it doesn't only apply to certain uses. It doesn't only apply to certain real estate in town, but it's sort of, relatively high level, relatively shallow. The idea is that it shouldn't have any dramatic impact or a big fiscal impact on any group, which is why, for instance, after wrestling with porch lighting, we decided that for now we would just exempt porch lighting. And there are a number of examples where in the process of our work, we've sort of stepped back. Same thing with cafe light, string light. The latest draft for discussion is to sort of, well, we are having so much trouble figuring out exactly how to regulate it. It's not a major problem. Let's maybe just exempt that for now, because this could always change later. Alexandra.
Thank you. I just, and I know when Bill Smith spoke up earlier, who's one of our staff in DPW that's worked on a lot of different pedestrian lighting projects, the focus here is really on the recreational component right now. I just want to make sure that in addition to the 2 athletic fields that we also have lights at other recreational facilities, pickleball and tennis courts and the ice rink and things like that. So just wanted to make sure that that was known and noted in terms of anything that the town would need to do to come into compliance on athletic facilities versus pedestrian scale lighting in our parks and open spaces.
Yep.
Oh,
Tennis,
that's good to know.
pickleball, and ice hockey are included in the RP6 list.
So one of the comments we haven't gotten to is one of Tim's comments about potentially allowing lights to stay on to clean up fields, to have social activities. And it was pointed out that the Parks and Recreation policy, which is posted right on their website, is that that parks are closed at dusk except where there's after dusk lighting, and that lighting goes off at 10. And that's an absolute policy across town, as far as I can tell. Does that correspond to practice, Alexandra, did you know of?
Typically, yes. However, I would say that there is the ability for a group that's renting that field space to, if things end at 10 o'clock, for them to keep those lights on while they pack up things and extend it basically for an extra 30-minute session. And that's really through the user agency that's rented that field. So I would say generally yes, however, not 100%. And certainly we don't have anyone enforcing at that hour.
Okay.
Can I ask how they're controlled? Do you set a timer based on the rental duration, or is there a signal that someone or text that someone sends to get them to turn off when they're gone from the field?
Yeah, so it's the newest system at Cypress is much more advanced and sophisticated in that it allows us to say absolutely the lights cannot be on past this hour. But we used to set the times and say, okay, this field is going to be used from 8 to 10 p.m. So the lights will go on, 15 minutes before 8 and be off 15 minutes after 10. However, due to using groups, sometimes canceling that game or shifting their schedule due to weather or availability of referees or whatever is happening, we would have lights on and not a user there. So now there's the ability for the user group to be able to say cancel and override and control that remotely for any of the permitted user groups. For our basketball courts and our tennis courts, again, different depending on the location and when the system was introduced. But our most recent basketball courts, again, such as at Cypress, have a timer that the user can push to turn on the lights. I want to say it's for 30-minute sessions, and then you can push it again and turn it back on. But we do have a hard stop of it can't be on past whatever the time is set. And those times have been quite variable depending on the neighborhood and community feedback.
Great, thank you.
All right, Elisa, back to you.
I think William Smith has his hand raised.
Oh, sure.
Just quickly furthering what Alexandra said, for example, at the Pierce basketball court, which is well under construction now for a different facility, but there we not only had a timer, so those lights at the court would go off at 10 p.m., but they had motion sensors. So if they were not being used, they would go off within, you could set it 5 or 10 minutes.
Nice.
Which we found helpful in terms of not having a voice, not lighting for no reason.
Excellent. Okay, so park that thought, because lighting for no reason is a theme here, or preventing lighting for no reason. So Commissioner Shute here had, I think, what section are we in here? We're in applicability. I think she expressed a concern about state, federal utility and transportation infrastructure, that the bylaw should not state that the most restrictive applicable lighting requirement automatically governs in every circumstance, that Mass DOT, MBTA, public utilities, state building and electrical codes, accessibility requirements, and other controlling authorities may govern lighting along public ways, and that in some locations, the town does not have full jurisdiction or the authority to modify the lighting. So DPW recommends that the bylaw be interpreted consistently with controlling state and federal requirements, exempt lighting required or governed by state or federal authorities, exempt lighting under the jurisdiction of Mass Department of Transportation, the MBTA, utilities, and other entities where the town lacks regulatory authority. Which, when we actually go through the content, I think we do that, but that, we'll kind of note that. Let's see. So continuing on the comments.
Right, no, I do think you could just go back up to the applicability. Isn't it in applicability, or it's in exceptions probably?
So it is,
or under exemptions, I guess it's not exceptions.
just see, hold on. I'm now kind of
We got
lost.
it down to 5 pages and now it's back up to 14.
No. Okay, I'm back. Guess I need to go in the other direction, which is
No, you're going down to exemptions.
it's an applicability. No, here we are. Here's applicability. So we have existing lighting, nonconformity, right, and so then so I guess the exemptions are come later, and
yeah, they're down at the bottom.
Yeah. Hold on. Exemptions. So we
next page. It's on the next page.
Yeah.
lighting
any form
on
of lighting.
property owned by either the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the United States government. So that may not,
Actually, David, I think even the preceding one, any form of lighting, the use of which is mandated or otherwise governed by any jurisdiction or authority greater than that of the town of Brookline.
so I don't think we wrote these. I think we cribbed these from other towns' bylaws.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, there are others with more expertise certainly than me on how to address appropriately, essentially do what Commissioner Shute was asking us to do, which is not get crosswise with the MBTA and other authorities. And when we don't have authority, that's what we want, right?
So maybe here, what if we, instead of saying greater, right? Because that assumes a hierarchy and there maybe we could just say other.
Well, can we just reference this? Can we just like, what do you call it? Call a lifeline to town council or other, you know, like, how do we do this? We agree with Commissioner Shute that we want to, where we can govern and get good lighting, we want to, but we also want to protect the town and not have it stepping on the toes of higher authorities. Can you help us draft that accurate appropriately?
I mean,
I'd rather not do it on the fly, but if
okay.
Ariel, we do have one lawyer on the committee, Ariel, so if you have a different opinion, I'm certainly going to listen to it.
I mean, I was going to make a suggestion, but we can do it. We can get other folks' comments instead.
So I'll just make.
You can go ahead and make your comment. I think if you have an idea, let's get it down.
So what we could do, we could say any jurisdiction or authority of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the federal government of the United States. And I'm not sure if I think the MBTA is an agency of the Commonwealth. So I think that would cover the MBTA as well. I'm not sure.
No, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned about the limitation of it, that it's on property owned by. Maybe that's too narrow.
Oh, that's why I was saying I would modify F, not because F, it says which is mandated or otherwise governed. I think the governed gives broad leeway to say, you know, instead of saying greater than that of the town of Brookline, I would say of, you know, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the federal government or any agency of either of the foregoing.
So.
Well, I mean, there's Commissioner Schutz's language of where the town does not have regulatory control
All right.
or regulatory authority.
Is there anybody on the committee who has reservations about essentially trying to do something that tracks with what the commissioner's asking?
Yeah, no.
Nope.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay, so then let's just move on and say that's our intent, and then we need to craft the language.
Okay. So I think where were we? Okay, so the next comment I believe is from Commissioner Shute again. DPW supports shielding, dimming, timers, and occupancy or motion controls when they are technically, financially, and operationally appropriate. However, requirements designed for private properties, such as a uniform 5-minute shutoff or a general lighting curfew, may not be appropriate for streets, sidewalks, crosswalks, transit stops, public parking areas, and other locations that require continuous lighting for safe travel, access, and security. The bylaw should expressly allow public lighting to remain operational where it is needed for pedestrian safety, roadway safety, accessibility, emergency response, security, or continued public use. So I thought we were pretty, I mean, so this was a comment on curfew. I mean, we do say lighting not for egress, public safety, or mandated by code, you know, is going to be subject to a curfew, you know, cutoff time TBD. But to me, that seems like it's broad enough to address her concerns?
Most of them, I think the only that like she's very precise until the very last clause or continued public use, and that's broad. That but it to the extent that it's about public ways, whether they're sidewalks or, I mean, yeah. I what are we thoughts? Ariel, our resident lawyer. Anybody else?
I wish I could say I had a magic cure-all for this one.
Well, like the prior, intent wise, I think that was our intent. Language wise, maybe town council can help us with the wording. So if there's anything in Commissioner Schute's wording that we somehow inadvertently didn't include, he can offer more inclusive language. But I don't think we were trying to not do exactly what she's asking for.
Yeah, and just as a pure kind of editorial comment from me at this point, I favor less language in the bylaw if we can cover things, and because I think a lot of the comments we've received recently are asking to insert very specific and a lot of verbiage on very specific things, and I think embracing the intent of those suggestions, it may be something we want to do, but I'm not sure in a lot of cases that we want to lengthen the bylaw with a lot of specific language if we can cover it in this more general kind of language here.
And that's the one theme I noticed. The majority of the staff commentary was more specificity, more detail, which is exactly where we started, but we've moved to more general per your earlier statement. And so perhaps we might, in the end, in the pitch to town meeting, explain, we started with more detail. We've moved away from more detail for these very good reasons. It means more things are going to be on a case-by-case basis if they're open to interpretation.
Right. David Trevette.
Basically, what we need is to think about use cases. And the comments that have been submitted to this committee have already helped identify a number of use cases. But for example, if we were to go back to some of the old pre-2016 language in the zoning bylaw, it refers to just activity and use. And one of the comments came up, I think, in a different part of this draft bylaw about what does use mean, what is nighttime activity. So I don't think we want to say, no, you're not allowed to have a group of people sitting around in your backyard and have some lights on around them so that they can see each other after 11 p.m. That is not egress. It's not really for public safety. It's not really mandated by code. And so are we saying you can't do that? I think we need to just be thinking about use cases where we might bump into problems with the language that we've identified.
So that's covered. So there's two things. So that's covered because it basically says or the conclusion of an active nighttime use for residential lighting.
And so that was the question that was raised, yeah.
Right, but what we have on paper now already allows people to keep their backyard light on until 4 a.m. if they're sitting out there drinking and talking. I mean, then some people may say that's too liberal, but that's why we also say you can't create a nuisance. Because if they're being rowdy and bothering their neighbors, or even if the light's shining in, hopefully they have a shielded light fixture. Also,
Right.
Can you go back to that text that scroll back to it? Yeah. Also, there was a comment that came in from who was it early on, who thought that we needed that greater definition of activity, and I actually changed it to just nighttime use so that I simplified this to just nighttime use, and that's broader, and I think it's appropriate. Well,
it was Jennifer Raitt. So, she had asked what constitutes a nighttime activity.
So now a use is like, there, you don't need, it's anything.
Okay, I missed that.
It's not a use if you just leave your light on and then, leave town.
Okay. Are we ready to move on, or?
Yeah, I think we've likewise said that we're okay with generally with what Aaron's asking for. We'd like to weave it in, yeah.
Yep, okay. So, so the next comment, had to do with the correlated color temperature. And this was from Tim Davis. I think that we will get to this discussion when we get into the athletic field, which I'm still gonna call it that, discussion. So,
But you had an idea how to carve out safety, which is the issue, or,
yes. Yeah, so this is my suggestion that I just added with this draft is, we could just say unless otherwise provided in this bylaw, the correlated color temperature, shall not exceed whatever, and then the otherwise provided in this bylaw could be in the athletic field section where we reference RP6, because that does allow for correlated color temperatures up to, I think, 5,700. So for safety reasons. David William Smith has a comment.
oh, please, Bill, you're Bill,
Thanks.
right? Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
When you're not,
I'm just a little concerned about the lower 2700 CCT without introducing another definition. That's the CRI, the color rendering index, because the lower that, when that temperature starts dipping below 3000, you start to skew the discernment of true colors. So we in public ways or any of our public lighting, we are cautious about going deep into the 2000s because we'll lose what is the true color of things. And I mean, just as an example, I think if you go down to 2500 or 24, the high pressure sodium on North Harvard Street is an orange yellow light that would meet your, that would be fine with your definition, but in terms of a satisfactory color rendering index, it's really an undesirable light. Just a thought. I mean, the ITE provides oodles of info. I love the fact that you're tying a lot of this to ITE. Let ITE every 5 years update their regulations based on new technology and measurable quantities. And I think that's the right thing to do. So you have a less wordy guidance document. But I am concerned about that restriction and not taking into account what your eye is actually seeing, which is the color rendering index. There's a balance.
Having just bought some light bulbs for my son 2 days ago, I can tell you that the CRI is not listed on any packaging at Home Depot, which I think lowest common denominator. People are going to go into the store and they're going to get a 2700 or a 3000 bulb off the shelf. And they're not going to know what CRI is, even if they did.
No, they won't, but
they're not available in the range. But I agree with your point. But
that's why you need, I think the committee of this bylaw needs to be very careful about specifying something, or it would be simpler to relate it to ITE acceptable CRTs and for different uses, or anyway, that's my comment. It's starting to get very yellow.
Yeah.
So Bill, if I can, if I can jump in here, this bylaw came about because there was a bylaw that had been advanced at the last fall town meeting, and I was one of the petitioners on that bylaw. And there were some issues that we were trying to address, and one of the suggestions was, could we provide more specificity by referencing some type of standards document? And the pushback that we received there was that some of these standards are not publicly available. So it's one thing to reference the ANSI IES standards for athletic fields, because the town presumably, can fork over the $120 to buy the publication. But we couldn't impose that obligation on every single resident in the town of Brookline for them to go to that to figure out what's in there. And so that's why we were trying to have something that kind of stands on its own to the extent possible. I would say too that the language that's here is from the model dark sky bylaw. So, for sort of general use, and maybe your point gets more to if your concern is like safety, then that's stuff that's more in the public way. Then, there could be some reference for municipal lighting, just as we're saying that we're allowing something different for sports lighting, that maybe there's something for municipal lighting that we add that says that, this or conforming to whatever the standard is that you mentioned.
See, it's color rendition
Okay, thanks.
index, and it's a big deal for anybody who's, specifying lighting. It's why everybody loved halogen light until it became too, energy intensive, because it has the super best color rendition index. Makeup mirrors, vanity mirrors, anytime you want to see flesh tones, you want a really high color rendition index. And absolutely, when you get into high pressure sodium or, orange light, everything is just yellow, and it's burdensome. So the point that was made that the high correlated color temperature of 4,000 plus, 5,000 plus is vital for athletic fields where, people are running around and running into each other, because it just improves people's vision. And it's a pure safety issue there. I think more broadly, what I'm hearing Bill say is something that I agree with, which is if we push it down, down, down in the interest of, some of the science that's been published around both human health and animal well-being, wildlife well-being, which really calls for at night having the lower color temperatures and staying away from daylight temperatures, there is a cost. I think that's the point. But CRI, I mean, we reviewed 63 different Massachusetts municipal bylaws, and I don't think color rendition index is in one, not even in one. So.
Okay, so kind of relevant to this discussion, Tim Davis had commented on the correlated CCT for athletic fields. Commissioner Shute noted that DPW recommends that lighting for the public way be a maximum of 3,000 with 2,700 preferred but not required in residential areas and environmentally sensitive locations where it is operationally and technically appropriate. A mandatory 2,700 K standard may negatively, it says exactly what Bill was just saying, may negatively affect color rendering and visibility in some roadway and pedestrian settings. Public lighting standards must continue to support the safe identification of pedestrians, vehicles, pavement conditions, and other hazards. The working paper and proposed bylaw should also use consistent language. Working paper generally seeks to minimize lighting above 3,000 K, while the proposed bylaw establishes 2,700 K as the default maximum.
So let's have discussion on that. I mean, because Elisa and I have, Elisa really feels, I don't want to speak for you, but that she'd really like it to be the way we have it drafted, which is telling people, make it 2,700 maximum. I personally, I would be I just like light that's a little bluer anyway. So that's just me, but I would be perfectly happy if we said everywhere that 2,700 was preferred and 3,000 was allowed. But, you know, we're a committee of 9. Other comments?
Who's with me on 2,700?
I wonder if a range would be better because you don't want to go too low for obvious reasons as well. I mean,
Just my personal opinion, I'm with David. Most of my light fixtures inside my house are 2,700, but for my clients as an architect, I do 3,000 because 2,700 is trying to approximate candlelight. We don't live in the period where we have candles anymore, but that's why humans like it because it looks like candlelight. But if you're trying to give enough neutrality to the color of the light, 3,000, while it's not super blue, in my opinion, is more neutral. In fact, when I bought the light bulb, I bought one that had 3 switches. It was 2,700, which said warm white. You could switch it up to 3,000, which said neutral white, or you can move it up to 4,000, which said cool white. So neutral, I think, is the goal. And if people are inclined to do orange or warmer tones because they prefer that in their home, that's fine. But I don't see a problem with giving municipal lighting. I'm looking at the RP IES RP. I don't think this is right, but RP6 and 3,000 to 4,000 is the municipal range. So we're going at the bottom end of the recommended practice for municipal lighting if we go 3,000.
Kevin Johnson?
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention if you want to see what 3,000 Kelvin temperature looks like on one of our light fixtures in the roadway, we do have a couple pilot going on Washington Street right near Greeno Circle, and you can see a significant difference in color from the 4,000 and the ones that are the one that is 3,000. You'll see a significant color difference rendering. I'd be hesitant to go a little lower than 3,000 in the roadway because that was a big jump that you will see when you if you go out and look at it. And it's right on Washington Street near Greeno Circle. You'll be able to see the difference in color of the lights from the different Cobra heads out there.
Do you also have a pilot in front of Stop and Shop? Because I noticed when I was doing my walk around and took some photographs that there's a section that is warmer than the flanking sections.
Yes, that ornamental light, decorative light, we just put that in a few weeks ago. It's a test pilot of a new bulb that retrofits to those type of fixtures that we could never get before.
So, can so I guess I have a question. Are we talking about 3,000 for municipal lighting? Are we talking about 3,000 for all lighting? Because if it's the latter, I want to bring back that, you know, part of our purpose here is, you know, to better protect wildlife from light pollution. And so if that is one of our goals, it would be nice to have, you know, 2,700 as maybe that's the residential standard, and maybe you can, just as we have a different, you know, standard, are going to have a different standard for athletic fields, we could say for municipal lighting, it could be up to 3,000.
I mean, Matt has brought up that the higher color temperature, correlated color temperature also is typical of commercial areas in previous meetings. So it wouldn't just be municipal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the original idea of we want it to be the same and not do many carve outs, the idea of a range does allow the town to be compliant and neighbors who prefer the warmer to be compliant within the same system. But Michael has his hand up.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I think you have to make a, we may not want to have too many carve-outs, but I think you have to make a difference between Hall's Pond and the SS Pierce building. Having having a different a standard for a Coolidge Corner, and having a different standard for, again, Hall's Pond. I mean, I think we have to think of what's usual and customary in that particular area. I'd like to take a look at these lights, the one at Greeno Circle. We keep talking about 3,000, 2,700, and I know I'm late to this committee. Is there a significant difference in the glow? So I'm assuming these are shielded fixtures. Is there a significant difference in the glow of that? Do we have a lot of light seepage, or how does this look to people? How does it look to you, Kevin? Is there a significant change?
I do, yeah, you can see a significant change in the color of the light fixture, of the temperature.
Well, that's
It does
looking
bring
down.
it down to a yellowish color.
Fine, that's looking down though, but we're concerned about, I mean, I share the concern for wildlife and bird flyover and everything else.
Yeah, all our fixtures too are dark sky compliant completely.
Yeah,
So
Michael, we're just talking about CCT correlated color temperature, not about seepage.
No, I understand that, but there's got to be a purpose to it. I mean, if we have I mean, we're talking about outdoor fixtures. I mean, what I put inside my home, of my store, whether I want to use Matt's candlelight or not. I mean, that doesn't seem to matter. So we're only talking about the outside. Is there a purpose to having the 3,000? I take it that there is, but didn't we?
Yeah, it's about both human health and maintaining circadian rhythms, that if you use colder light, bluer light, higher color temperature light, it has an effect on both on all organisms that's more disruptive to have daylight color at night and less disruptive to have candlelight color at night. So
All right.
we have a lot of science articles that we can also footnote and reference in our explanation of the article that back up the lower color temperature with science.
And I read through a lot of that initially, the 3,000 and 2,700. The concern here, is there a significant difference in what we're trying to accomplish? Is there?
So I would argue, you know, putting the defender of wildlife hat on, if we are going to exempt porch lighting from being shielded, that it would be better to have the you know, those bulbs be 2,700 than 3,000.
All right. It sounds like we have, again, some drafting work, you know, to try to figure out how to balance this. I don't hear a lot of argument about it. So let's whatever. We have work to do. We may not get it all done by tomorrow night in terms of the micro drafting, but if we can set up a meeting for 2 weeks from now, that, you know, and we can get through intent and agreement on intent in this week, then maybe we're on a good path.
Okay, so continuing on with DPW's comments, Commissioner Shute just echoed Tim Davis's comments about sports and athletic fields. So one of next comment by Tim is relates to the curfew. So if right now the draft has 11 p.m. as a placeholder, and you know, we had discussed 10 p.m. versus 11 p.m. And so if Tim is noting that the general curfew requires lights to be turned off no later than 10 p.m. or 1/2 hour after the conclusion of any active nighttime use. Sports lighting may remain on and so in the current draft, it allows sports lighting to remain on 1 hour after completion of play. And so he's asking, does the 1 hour sports provision supersede the general 1/2 hour provision? Can sports lighting remain on after 11 p.m. if play ends late? Does active use include field maintenance, cleanup, and team departure, or does it refer only to active play? So lots of questions in there.
Right. And then also we heard, I mean, I hadn't read it, but Giles and Murphy pointed out the Parks and Recreation policy that's written clearly on their web page, which says that parks are closed at dusk except where there's lighting, and where there's lighting, the light turns off at 10. So there's already, so we have to take that into consideration too in terms of reviewing our draft, because I don't think, we have to decide if our intent is to liberalize a policy where, if the Parks and Recreation Commission has voted a policy where the lights go off at 10, for us to say, well, it's 11, but if you want to stay later, that's fine. I'm not sure we want to do that.
I would agree with that. So, so maybe we just need to revisit the curfew now with the knowledge of the Parks and Rec policy.
Well, once again, I'd like to say that it depends on the area. I'm sorry, but it does. I would think if you have a business district, all right, I would like to see this be at least midnight. If you have people coming out of the Coolidge Corner Theater and most of the businesses around are shut down, how warm and inviting is that to the people in the area? Athletic is something else. Hall's Pond is something else.
Let's look at the language that we have in directly in relation to Michael's concern.
So now we're going back to curfew.
Yeah.
It just was a comment on curfew.
Right there.
It's the later of 11 p.m. or 1/2 hour after the close of business. So does that address your concern, Michael?
No, not really. Look, we can live. Speaking as for some of the businesses, we can live with probably anything. But I mean, it doesn't make a warm and inviting area. The booksmith, the theaters, the restaurants around. Some are open that late and later. I don't see that in a business district it harms anybody, as long as the lighting is not a nuisance, for them to have a warm and inviting area. Now look at the signage is pretty strict in Brookline, and the usage is pretty strict. You're not allowed to have the Route 1 auto mile out in Brookline, nor does anybody want it. All right. But to allow someone to have their store lights illuminated or their front windows illuminated from 11 to midnight, I mean, I don't think harms the wildlife in particularly the business district. And that's what we're talking about, a very narrow frontage. We're not talking about the back parking lots. We're talking about frontage on Beacon Street, frontage on St. Mary's Street. It's relatively small areas overall.
Oh,
Right. So I understand you. You're saying that this shouldn't just apply to, the extension shouldn't apply only to businesses that are open for business, that you'd like to see, if you're running a business that closes at a bar that closes at 1 a.m. or whatever, you'd like the businesses on either side to be allowed to have their outdoor illumination on after they close, to make a friendlier sidewalk.
Yeah, a friendlier area. For one, thinking particularly around the holiday season. It's one thing to string up bulbs. People can trim their windows. People can put different displays in there.
The displays are exempt. The displays are interior lighting. They're not covered by this curfew. The curfew is only for exterior mounted light fixtures, and having visited all of Brookline's commercial areas now, there are a dozen in the town that have outside light fixtures. Most of the exterior lighting on our sidewalks, the municipal lights. So just to be clear, this curfew is just for any building mounted light fixtures on a commercial building would be subject to this, and there are very, very few. I had photographs that we shared at a meeting a couple back.
How about how about the trees in Washington Square that are draped with lights?
Those are string lights. I believe they're exempted in this bylaw.
In all cases?
Yes. Is that right, David? I haven't read the last.
Yeah, that's the way it's drafted now. They're just exempted, and holiday lights are just exempted, period.
The curfew got pretty lenient, which is not a bad thing. It's really just the exterior lights, outdoor lights. True to the name of the committee.
Okay, I I
What-
would,
I had the same reaction you did earlier, which is why I toured around like, wait, is this going to cause problems for the businesses? And it's not.
there's a line that's been added to that string lights thing that I hope we're going to discuss at some point, which changes it.
about being shielded.
No, string lights aren't shielded. We'll get to string lights.
No, but while we're on curfew, can we discuss the 11 PM? Because I thought that at the last meeting that we had come to the agreement that 10 PM was acceptable because we have so many other carve outs that we have, it can be later for businesses. And if you're out there, having a party or whatever, sitting on your porch with somebody else, or even just sitting on your porch by yourself, you're out there using the space, that it can be that you can keep them on. But I would like to make the case for 10 PM because, part of what motivated this is getting to sleep. And so, a lot of people, at least typically would like to go to bed around 10 PM. And also now that we know that the town has a policy on field lighting, having a 10 PM curfew, as we discussed, being consistent and kind of not, differentiating, trying to have things as common as possible, I would like to make the case for 10 PM.
Discussion?
Just checking what the zoning bylaw is for sign lighting.
I thought you already told us that it was
I
11
want to
and a
double
half
check.
hour.
Yeah, just want to double check.
How do other people feel? 10 PM feels a little retro blue law-y to me, but I also don't have curtains and wake up with dawn and just tolerate it. So I'm a good sleeper, so I'm sympathetic to anybody who isn't.
Yeah, it's 11 p.m. or half hour past. So our zoning already says 11 p.m. or half hour past the close of business.
So, and again, that's commercial. So I think
Right.
part of the tension here is this idea of bifurcating, and I think for those of us who spent, hours and hours and days working on warrant article 8 a year ago in the fall, we really got snagged down the rabbit hole by a lot of this complexity and specificity, and it dragged that effort down, resulting in it being referred and this committee being formed. And I think that if one were to wave a wand, we might say that it was 11 PM for commercial, it was 11 PM in the business districts, and for large multifamily, perhaps that's okay. People are still coming and going, driving home, walking from the T. But in, the single family neighborhoods where it's much darker, 10 PM would be appropriate and better. So I guess that's kind of our question is, do we want to try to, go in that direction and start to create more differentiation, understanding that it's a slippery slope?
So we're not, understand, what the zoning code says for signage, but we're not regulating signage here, so it's okay to
I
have.
know it's more so people don't have to remember different rules for different parts or uses. To David's point, the town of Brookline all lighting off by 11 is easy for everyone to get a handle on. And if people have it on, and if they have it on after 10 and it's creating a nuisance, even though they can say I'm allowed to have it on by 11, you're not allowed to create a nuisance. So there is still a complaint option to address, an egregious example of someone who has a light fixture pointed out their backyard till midnight. Like there's still a mechanism in this, even if we have 11 as the simple to understand cutoff time.
So going back to, I appreciate, that simplicity and, consistency. I guess going back to wildlife, certainly for wildlife, I don't know if everyone had a chance to read Fran Perler's comments, but, I thought she spoke very eloquently about the impact of nighttime lighting on migrating birds. which is significant. But I actually found a couple of papers that they are now understanding that artificial light at night even impacts diurnal animals. And so the other thing that they're finding now is that artificial light at night impacts how trees absorb carbon, and artificial light at night impacts them in a negative way. So like for sustainability and supporting wildlife, the earlier the lights are off, the better. And if we have these carve outs for, you can have your porch lights on, right? And you can have, well, I guess the porch lights have to be off, right? Unless they're unless you're out there on the porch. It just, I don't know.
Well,
The other argument.
The other members of the committee want to weigh in on this? I think we need to get back to DPW's issues
Right.
tonight while we have them, so that we don't have to drag them in here on another night. But I would like to hear, I mean, because Matt and I are kind of like 11 seems good, Elisa's no, 10, but there's 9 members of the committee. So anybody else want to speak up?
I'm in favor of 11.
Julie?
I share Elisa's wildlife concerns, so I think I'm still leaning towards 10.
All right, or somehow addressing wildlife concerns,
Yes.
which we could potentially do another way.
I could stay with 11.
I'm okay with 11. I'm okay with 11.
Thank you, Pat.
So that sounds like, is that 5 in favor of 11? Yes, right?
Yeah, for now, but I do think we
We'll
can
move on.
continue to wrestle with wildlife.
Yep. Okay. So so we were back with DPW. Hold on. I think there's a comment from Tim Davis that we didn't get to. That was okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we were talking about curfew. So Tim's point about the that we reference the IES, this is an athletic field lighting. So I would suggest that this, so his concern is that right now the language for athletic fields references the, hold on. It says the NCIS RP6 in the lighting should conform to the prevailing edition. So Tim had concerns about how that would work because if you, or successor publication, if you're starting a project and midway through your project, a new edition comes out, does that mean that you have to, kind of restart your project and adjust your lighting to comply with the newer publication? So he said, I think that the comment about or successor publication, he said automatically incorporating future editions could change Brookline's requirement without additional town meeting action. It could also create confusion when an existing installation was designed under an earlier edition or active construction is taking place. The bylaw should identify the applicable edition and allow the building commissioner to recognize later editions through a defined administrative process.
So this is a wonderful point for us to take to pause and think about, because if you read Jenny Rait's comments, she, and also the document that she shared, a new document from the APA, the American Planning Association, on best practices, both Jenny's comments and the APA document are really focused towards zoning. And what we know about zoning is it happens when you build and not forever. And because this is a general bylaw, I'm actually very sympathetic to Tim Davis's point, which is that if our bylaw is constantly updating and every light in Brookline needs to conform to it, then somebody builds a brand new facility according to RP 6-2024, which is the one in force now, and then RP 6-2030 comes out, and all of a sudden they're non-compliant with the law. I don't think we want to do that. So, maybe we just say that that it needs to comply with RP 6. I mean, we could say RP 6-2024 and then let the building commissioner solve the problem in the future, basically just punt it at the building commissioner, which is this Tim's suggestion. Or we could simply sort of pretend ignorance to the updating and the additions and say that it has to comply with RP 6. Now, that doesn't solve the problem when the RP documents all of a sudden cease being published and a whole new authority starts, publishing the guidelines, and it's not, these documents, right? So, but we can't solve everything.
I'm looking for it. The information that Tommy Vitola shared, which is the new state regs, did they tie it? That was not, did they tie it to a year, a publication year?
It's a good question. The other thing is, though, that that they do tie it to the expenditure of municipal or state funds. So it's kind of zoning-ish in the sense that it, all of that dark sky limitations are on projects that use new money. And so it's kind of, it's when you spend the money, when you do the project. So it kind of ties to the current edition, but and so it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily zoning, but it has that flavor. It's not perpetual. It just, because that's in the preamble, that's in the first sentence of the language in the bill is this addresses any outdoor lighting that utilizes state or municipal funds.
So if we just took out the language that referenced the prevailing edition, called it RP 6-24 and took out the successor publication if applicable.
That's Tim's suggestion, I think. That seems okay. It's
Kevin
not
has his
it's
hand
not
up.
perfect, but it might cover us. Kevin and then Ariel.
Dave, I was just wondering if it could be as simple as saying you referenced the latest edition, but no less than RP 6-24.
But if we reference the latest edition, it puts somebody who installs something today at risk 10 years from now. Because it's a general bylaw that's applicable to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, but it also explains that if in 5 years or 10 years from now it goes, 5 editions more, you're still in compliance if you did it by RP 6-24. That's just a suggestion.
latest edition, but no less than RP 6-24. But doesn't that let anybody, that means then we don't hold people to the standard when 10 years from now, somebody does a new installation, they can just comply with the 10-year-old standard, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah. You're correct there. I'm just trying to, maybe there's a language that says you must, but
Yeah, but I think Tim's language is the same as Kevin, what you're suggesting, which is it basically says you have to do RP 6-24. Maybe what you're suggesting gives the building commissioner a little bigger stick.
But remember that this is just for sports and athletic field lighting, right?
Right. Although we do have language elsewhere in which we generalize and reference RP, ANSI, IES RPs. We have another sentence somewhere, which maybe we'll get to later or tomorrow.
Just quickly on this, I think I made mention of this with my photograph of the Walgreens exterior lights. That at the time they installed those, which was got 30 years ago, they thought they were doing the right thing by putting in a high efficiency lamp, which would not comply with this new bylaw, but they were doing the right thing at the time. If the town invests in new lighting with a 30-year payback calculation, we want that to be okay until such time as it would normally need to be replaced for, longevity reasons. So I appreciate the call out that having a fixed moment in time is helpful. At the same time, I'm still permitting projects in New York City with the 1968 building code as the reference because you can still do that in certain systems, or certain instances. So double-edged sword.
I'm in favor of freezing whatever standard we want to pick in the bylaw. So if we say RP6 as of 2024, as I think the proposal is now, I think that's a good idea. I think that in part for reasons of democratic accountability, if there's a change in law, that change in law should be passed by town meeting. There shouldn't be an automatic change in law because a nonprofit, code provider decides that a different standard should apply. And I don't think that's a fair or correct way to pass a law. So for that I think is my sort of big reason to oppose this. There are also other reasons to oppose. I should be clear, to oppose changing the standard automatically, or even giving the discretion to the building commissioner to change it. I think, if we're going to use an external standard, we should freeze that external standard at a point in time for that reason. I also think, Matt, the point you brought up about payback periods, these are different systems than, say, I don't know, an outdoor light that I put on the outside of my house. And I guess it kind of sucks to be me if I put the wrong one and then I have to change it 2 years later or something. But if, we're talking about a system that has substantial capex, is expected to last 30 years, et cetera, and then you say to yourself, okay, well, what's the carbon cost, for example, of taking that entire system and tossing it in the garbage? Because now we've decided that we should have a slightly different system. I mean, I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm sure that it costs a whole lot of dollars. So it seems to me like there are two very different reasons, one economic and one for reasons of government structure, that I think keeping this frozen is much better than having it be dynamic.
David Trevette?
I just wanted, I'll just agree with what Ariel just said. I mean, I'm comfortable with linking it to a specific edition of a standard and having it come back to town meeting if it needs to be updated. The point is, my point is that it's better than what we have today. So linking it to a standard is a good thing.
Right. Okay. I think we have a consensus.
All right, moving on. Okay, so let's see. So we got that IS. All right, so no, okay, so let me just see where 44 was. Oh yes, on nuisance. So we have a requirement that no exterior fixtures shall create a lighting nuisance. And Tim's comment is that there's no measurable standard. It defines a nuisance broadly as interference with someone's enjoyment of property. Sports lights are visible by nature, particularly near residential neighborhoods. Even a professionally designed system could generate complaints simply because residents can see the illuminated field or fixtures. This creates potential enforcement uncertainty for both new and existing facilities.
So, I mean, there's also a comment from, I think from the commissioner, having concerns about the open-ended definition of nuisance and the fact that my nuisance may not be your nuisance.
Right.
I'm comfortable with, at the moment, like we haven't had discussion, but I'm fairly comfortable with the language that we have. And because people can say it's a nuisance and complain, and that lodges a complaint, but they don't get to determine that it's a nuisance. The determination of that it's a nuisance is going to be done by the authority, which we haven't gotten to, but I think my sense is that the authority may end up being certainly the building commissioner, who's been on the line for that in all of the discussions so far, but potentially expanding that to also include the Board of Health or the health commissioner. And so then they have to say, well, no, those fields, the lights are going off at 10 o'clock. And the lights are, whatever. Anyway, Alexandra.
Just, I guess, a process question. I think some of the comments that were submitted by Jocelyn Murphy came in after DPW, or maybe passing in the cyberspace as we submitted our comments. So we didn't specifically comment on those suggestions, but we've looked at them since they've been submitted and to just have some suggestions and clarifications on those. So I knew we were moving past them just now and just wasn't sure when the committee would be taking those up and what the best way is to provide some feedback on that.
Very good question. Elisa, how far along are we on DPW's comments that we already have? Because I think the right thing to do,
I think
because
we're
Jocelyn's comments are about a lot of Parks and Rec properties. And so I think maybe we stay on the path we're on and then we immediately circle back and march through Jocelyn's.
Yeah, I think we just have a few left. So we have a prohibition on variable light output, so intermittent fading, flashing, blinking, etc. And Tim Davis pointed out that the prohibition on dynamically changing lights could unintentionally apply to scoreboards, goal indicators, event lighting, or programmable recreation lighting unless those items are defined or exempted. Would these qualify for special permitted use?
It would be a good question for the building commit. I mean, that seems to me a reach. Like, I'm not worried about that, but I'm not invalidating Tim's concern. But I think that it's a stretch to say that somebody's going to make you take down the scoreboard or whatever because it blinks, because it changes. I don't know. Other thoughts?
I guess my question would be, is a scoreboard is illuminated, but is it considered a lighting fixture?
Probably not.
Well, they're light. If you go to Fenway, it's a light bulb screwed into a socket. So literally, it is a light fixture. But I agree with David. It's like no one is going to call that out as a problem.
And so, but on the related, still on this topic of, flashing, rotating strobe or similar lighting, she's saying the prohibition on this should also contain clear exceptions for legally required or safety related devices, including traffic signals, which, good point, they, warning beacons, emergency vehicles, construction safety lights, and similar public safety equipment. So, we're not
So
regular.
can we deal with those things in exemptions, though?
And do we already require for safety? And we had three categories that those all fit in.
Emergency lighting, yeah, I thought that it was, and we have temporary lighting. I thought that it was covered by, our exemptions.
Yeah.
Well, and then we need to look at the exemption for street lighting, and we'll talk about expanding that maybe to include bike paths and walkways and things, right?
And I could just interject. I mean, I think we are covered, but I just want to remind people we're delighted from a pedestrian point of view of having new installations of rapid rectangular flashing beacons at crosswalks through town, up and down Harvard Street and other locations. These are absolutely flashing lights. That is part of their function. I think the term street lighting will incorporate that, but it's not what people necessarily automatically think of as street lighting.
Agreed.
So we may need to expand this definition to, I mean, or we need a separate one. Because, I mean, street lighting I was just imagining that you're just talking about general illumination of public ways. And it could include, if there's lighting on the staircases up and down Brookline's storied hills, and pedestrian pathways that have lighting. So is it valuable in any way for that to be a distinct category separate from from traffic controls? Or I don't know. How do we efficiently basically say that certainly that traffic controls are not, this isn't meant to limit traffic controls, because it's not.
What if we just street lighting, including traffic controls, takes care of it?
But just looking at IES includes street lighting, but it does not include traffic signals. That's under the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So there's a separate code that dictates standards for those.
So should it just be a separate, should we just want to make that F and say traffic control devices?
Yep.
Pedestrian and vehicular traffic control devices are exempt?
Yep.
Pedestrian. Vehicular traffic.
And given the recent installation of some bicycle-specific traffic control devices, I'm not sure that falls under vehicular.
I think aren't bicycles vehicles? We don't have somebody from
I'm
that.
asking.
We don't have a T-board.
We do have bicycle-specific lights in Boston.
I think they're considered vehicles.
I think they are,
Okay.
but I'm not sure.
I'm asking Claude. I'll let you know.
Bill and I are both making the same face, which is
I can check with the T-board member too.
we're not super sure, but we can clarify with transportation staff tomorrow.
I don't think we need to say are exempt because we don't say it in the other ones.
Right.
Yeah, it's a list of exemptions.
Right.
In that same guideline that controls traffic control devices, bicycles are in the list of vehicles that they control. So I think we're covered.
Okay, good.
I think traffic control devices unto itself is general enough.
So just take pedestrian and traffic control devices,
Just traffic control devices.
Just traffic control devices.
period.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the word pedestrian added something there.
It does, but to the point it may not be necessary. But you're right. I mean, but we're not so worried about controlling pedestrian movements, except where they come in conflict with cars and might get run over.
What if we said pedestrian traffic control devices? I mean, do we need to say owned and operated by the town of Brookline, or?
Alex,
I think we should just leave it.
No,
I think it's eloquent as it is, but other people can speak up.
Okay. Okay, so we've got that.
Okay, but there was those comments that we just looked at from Aaron. I don't know that we'd covered all of those.
I'm trying to find where they were, because we're kind of like.
Right. Well, this whole page is 3 long comments from Aaron.
Okay,
No,
right.
go down to the next page.
Right. But this was the comment that caused us to just add what we just added about traffic control devices. So the next comment from Commissioner Shute is basically making her plea that okay, so DPW strongly supports a clear exemption for lighting owned, operated, maintained, or managed by the town of Brookline. So that would be all municipal lighting. The current exemption for street lighting installed on public ways may not clearly include all municipal lighting, such as pedestrian scale lighting, decorative streetscape fixtures, pathways, stairs, public parking areas, municipal buildings, schools, parks, playgrounds, athletic facilities, conservation lands, and other town properties. DPW recommends replacing the current provision with a broader exemption covering all town-owned or town-managed outdoor lighting. The same exemption could also be included in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And then Aaron suggests language: outdoor lighting owned, operated, maintained, and managed by the town of Brookline. Well, I won't read her, maybe not read her suggested language, because maybe we should just discuss and see what we think about the concept.
Right. And I want to ask, Kevin, I don't want to ask you to like contradict your boss, but I do want to ask Bill and Kevin and Alexandra if possibly what you've heard for the last almost 2 hours would potentially make DPW less, committed to this need for a blanket exemption. It just, how is this starting to address, anyway, yeah, it's a sort of an open question if any of you want to pick it up.
Nobody's touching that hot potato.
Well, because I don't think that, I don't want to speak for everybody on this committee, but I don't think the committee as a whole is inclined to pass a bylaw that applies to everybody in town, but not the town. It doesn't look good.
I'm probably my largest concern is shared by Aaron, is exempting lighting, requiring, to the extent it requires us to retrofit existing fixtures. I think moving forward, when we replace, expand a system, or substantially or undertake a new project, we would certainly follow the guidelines and best practice, which evolves, which is going to evolve faster than your the bylaw, I think, and we try to follow the best practices available. And I would hate to be constrained in new installations.
Bill, do you know the life expectancy of one of those LED panels in a street light? Is it 30 years
that's
or
expanded.
less?
Those that we installed 10 years ago had have a shorter lifespan than those that we'd install today.
Yeah, a lot of LEDs are like 50,000 hours, right?
I mean, for example, those that we installed in 2005, 2007 on the traffic signal heads along Beacon Street, we saw failures almost immediately within the first 2 to 5 years and had to replace heads. That doesn't happen any longer.
I think we started to talk about this earlier in the meeting, that for my sense, for the municipal lighting, it's going to be changed over time. There's a maintenance program that's funded. There's already a mechanism to put these changes in place. So if the goal is for the town to comply with the bylaw, but for them, the mechanism is funding, we could just tie it to when replaced versus retrofitting. Like that seems pragmatic,
I think that's
and meeting the intent. It may take 30 years, but we'll get there.
I would agree, Kevin. If we were to undertake a replacement program, we'd work to comply with current dark sky.
I definitely agree with that we can, during the replacement, if we're going up to replace a bulb, we can replace it with one that is in within the bylaw. From like a 4,000 to a 3,000, which we've tested and it can be done. I just want to point out that whether I don't think it's a safety issue or anything like that, but you will have inconsistent color throughout the road, the road. So it won't be eye aesthetic for sure, but does it interfere with the lumens and the safety of the road? But it will be very inconsistent throughout a roadway or a street. You'll see different colors.
Frankly, you already do now. I've noticed it more since I've been on this committee.
I think the concern is just not that moving forward, we can't reach compliance with what's outlined, but the pace to reach that compliance may not be comparable to the budget that we have to do that. And hearing the conversation previously about, unfunded mandates and, how you can't require a future town meeting to encumber dollars, I think we just need to be mindful of the pace that it will take for the replacement schedule to meet what's outlined here.
So what I'm hearing is a request that potentially we could solve this by expanding probably the language under exemptions for these major outdoor systems, like the street lighting. Let's look at the exemption that we already had written down for street lighting, which basically says it's exempt except, when you replace systems, make best efforts to comply. I think it's on the next page. Yeah.
Yep.
Street lighting installed on public ways and owned and operated by the town, except that are exempt. In other words, except that whenever and wherever systems are replaced or substantially reconfigured, these systems should, which is not really a good, I mean, we can put that word in there, but it's a wishy-washy word, right? Usually it says shall comply to the maximum extent practicable. Maximum extent practicable is already wishy-washy. So you could say shall comply to the maximum extent practicable. It's the 5 year primarily is too short, and the 1 year has some gotchas in it that are also problematic. Been pointed out, if you replace the head on one of the 4 posts, that's you hit the 25% at Cypress Field or whatever it is, right? And then you have to do the whole system. So, and Fran, I see your hand up. I'll recognize you in a minute. Discussion?
So is the proposal to expand this exemption, street lighting and other municipal lighting to
Not,
include,
but maybe not to include, but not, I don't think we need it for the, outdoor lighting at town hall.
Sure.
Potentially, we could sort of say buildings are small enough that we don't necessarily need to exempt them.
Yeah, but you'd add in addition to street lighting, there'd be some other things in this exemption. Which is all the exemption saying is you have the runway to do it. That I think is the primary concern we're hearing from staff.
So I guess can I just ask and Bill, I heard what you said about older, lighting, maybe put in 10 years ago didn't last very long, but now it has a longer lifespan. But what is the current anticipated lifespan of some of this lighting? Because what I would be uncomfortable with is, are we going to be stuck with what we have for 30 years? So, is there sort of a general benchmark for
current LED lighting?
Yes.
I would say you're looking at the 20-year mark.
Yeah, so like 20 years is a long time.
And what we also don't know
it's
is
designed
which of the fixtures aren't compliant, right? Go ahead, Bill.
We would know.
Well,
but
yeah, no, but we don't know.
No, okay.
I mean, because Kevin earlier said that your street lights are shielded. So, I mean, how, we're talking about a huge capital plant across town of all of the outdoor lighting that DPW certainly operates and replaces and maintains. But what we don't know is 50% of it non-compliant with what we're asking for? Is 5% of it non-compliant with what we're asking for?
But now remember, we're not talking, so street lighting is already covered. What about, athletic field lighting, other, lighting in other parts of, other lighting that's controlled by the town?
such as parking facilities, public building grounds, which would include schools, pedestrian paths, pedestrian alleyways, stairs, and parks.
I mean, it just, if you exempt it all, it really kind of guts what I think was the sentiment of the committee, that, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we as residents have to comply, you know, the town should have to comply as well.
Well,
And we
it
could
is that
revisit
just
the,
what Alexander said. It is an unfunded mandate. At
well,
that
it's, yes,
point,
although it would ultimately
until
be
such
an
funding is.
well, but it would be an unfunded mandate that was the party responsible would not be this committee. All we're doing is putting something in the warrant. Ultimately, town meeting would own it, and it would be town meeting's action that would enact it, and it's town meeting's budget. So they would be placing an unfunded mandate on themselves, which is a little better than us doing it on them. I'm going to let Fran jump in here, and then we can get back to our discussion, who's waited so patiently.
Thank you, David, for the opportunity to speak. And I'm speaking more as a person from the public. And I understand Commissioner Schutz's idea of we should be exempt because we can't pay, it's unfunded mandate. But from my point of view as a citizen, it's like, why bother? Because the majority of lighting around town that we're talking about is in fact municipal lighting. And so I think the discussion where you give the town or the departments a maybe longer leash to get it changed would be appropriate, because given the fiscal restraints that everyone has, if they're not required to do it in a time frame, it's not going to happen because there are other things that need money. The other aspect is if you give them a long enough time to get this done, then that gives town meeting the opportunity to fund it, to get it done by the deadline. So from the point of view as somebody who hasn't been involved in these discussions for very long, I agree with the goose and gander that this goose doesn't want to see the gander take advantage of the residents. But, you know, I assume you guys can come up with a balance that even if it mandates the requirement of following the rules for replacement, I think those have to be written down, because with the financial constraints, it may not happen. So basically, I think you get my point.
Yeah, thank you. I do find your assertion that mostly we're talking about municipal lighting surprising, because I don't think the committee would agree with that. And I think that certainly the discussion of an illuminated driving range with lights way up on poles, adjacent to Putterham Woods and all of that, is on the front of mind for a lot of us. And there's been a lot of discussion and contention about that. But that's a new installation. And so we're not talking about that at the moment when we say that the town would be exempt, because new installations would not be exempt.
I think you have to make that clear, because Erin said the town should be exempt. And if you don't exempt new things, that would be good. I look at the town having, I'm not sure how you define municipal, but I call that anything except a resident or a commercial. And I think there's just a lot more lighting issues with parking lots, with, the golf course, with, parks and rec and stuff. than there are with people having, lights on their driveway. I hate to be cynical, but I think with the physical constraints on each department, that it's difficult for them to do what's right in an, as you say, unfunded mandate without a requirement to do it in a certain time frame. That's all.
Thank you. Alexandra.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I think the part of the concern is that, again, the timeline that may be set isn't going to align with the timeline we have for funding replacement. So I think if a time constraint is something that the committee feels is really important, then I think it would just require some analysis on what the timeline is for the lights that we're talking about and the associated cost and replacement with those, because it is not something that is a robust budget item for us. And so I think that needs to be taken into account for the ongoing maintenance for existing lights and facilities. I'm not speaking about new. And then the other thing that I'll say is, in the spirit of the bylaw here, the town, I'm sure there are many examples of this, but for example, in the recently adopted Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, there is a commitment to dim our streetlights for energy reduction purposes, but for the town to pilot that and expand that across the town. So there are other existing plans and documents that have been adopted that speak to what the town is trying to do that does comply with the spirit of what's happening here as well.
I do have a thought. It's a complicated one, which is against the grain of what I'm trying to argue most of the time for how we formulate this bylaw. But I do have a thought, which is problem solving, if not a good way to write the bylaw, or it might be, which is for all of these town facilities that we've been discussing for the last period of time, they all have DPW knows the date of which these systems were put in service. And it might be possible to tie the replacement requirement in the bylaw to, a period. I mean, it would be different for different kinds of systems, so that's a complication. But if we came to an agreement that, that compliance was required at the later of 5 years from when the bylaw goes in place, or X number of years, 20 years from the time at which the system was put into service. And so then if a system was put into service 20 years ago or 25 years ago, it would hit the 5-year mark. If it was put into service 15 years ago, it would also hit the 5-year mark if we said 20 years. But DPW might say that's too short. Our systems are supposed to last longer than that. We need 25 years. Anyway, I mean, it's kind of detailed and nuanced, but it's one way to do this. And we couldn't really require it of private owners, but DPW has the information, I assume. Discussion. Let's keep us moving. Any comments from the committee?
My comment would be that's, well, I don't know how readily accessible that information may be. Maybe there's a spreadsheet somewhere that, you could just like, hey, here's the info, but thinking about our deadline and, needing to get something finished by the end of next month, which is pretty soon. I don't know that we could get that done. And also, I still feel like I appreciate the Bill, your comment about, wastefulness of maybe decommissioning a otherwise working system prematurely. But at the same time, given the lifespan of some of these, 20 years is a long time. So maybe there's a way to meet in the middle about, we're already exempting street lighting, but I think maybe David, to your earlier comment about building lighting and stuff, I don't know what kind of fixtures those are, is this something as simple as, you can change a bulb? I don't know. I don't know, if they're more like integrated systems where there really is no bulb that can be replaced or what, but it just feels like a long time to have the town do its part towards reducing light pollution.
All right, so one of the things we talked about was just expanding the exemptions, although Elise is reticent to do that. I mean, should we just come back to this tomorrow? Try to keep moving?
I think so.
Okay, so there were two other comments of Aaron's there. The first one is, the second one that we're looking at on screen now is about her concern that we talked about, the limited, that we don't have nuisance well defined. I don't know that we've discussed that. The first comment, she's concerned that we're not clear enough about exemptions for temporary construction and infrastructure lighting. I actually think we are clear enough on that already. It's pretty broad. It basically says construction work lighting is exempted, emergency lighting, but then it says temporary lighting for road repair, utilities. It's kind of what she asked for, and it's right there.
Yeah.
All right. Any discussion of this concern that nuisances, she says the last sentence in her comment 53, DPW will continue to respond to resident concerns regarding glare and outdoor lighting. However, the proposed language could be difficult to administer consistently across the town if every person's individual standard for nuisance is applied. And I think the point I made earlier is people are going to make a complaint if they have a complaint and say that this is a nuisance, but it doesn't mean it is a nuisance. And complaints are going to get investigated no matter what. So I don't know that we can solve it by having a highly detailed definition. Julie?
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I think what we discussed previously was that, the building inspectors will, be the ones deciding if it's truly a nuisance and I think we were applying that standard specifically, you know, not we wanted not to exempt holiday lighting and other types of lighting that we were exempting from the nuisance standard. So, yeah, I agree with you.
All right, Elisa, are we close to done with DPW, the written comments from DPW?
Except for enforcement, which I think is, I think you.
Well, right. I mean, Aaron had suggested not she'd suggested that we shouldn't have police and DPW in there. I think also somebody from staff said, well, I think that the idea maybe is that and the building commissioner liked the idea of adding health. So maybe we get to the detailed enforcement discussion tomorrow. We've registered the concern.
Yep.
Okay. So let's
real quick, one question. Sorry. At the
Yeah.
very beginning, town council had that first red comment about what should be put in the zoning bylaw versus the general bylaw.
Oh, what's already in the zoning.
Okay.
It's in the zoning.
It already is there. Got it. I thought that was a suggestion on where to put it.
No. So the zoning, just to cover it's in our packet, but what I put together for the committee to potentially submit to the warrant as a zoning change.
Yeah.
Is taking two sentences that are in the zoning bylaw today, not editing a single word. In 2016, they used to be just directly, these two sentences used to be in a section called illumination.
Yeah.
Now they're in the same section called illumination, but they're under a subheading that says signs. And they're not about signs. So the only thing that I'm proposing and asking the committee to propose to town meeting is that we just rearrange where these two sentences show up in the zoning bylaw without changing them at all, so that they're under illumination, so that they clearly regulate outdoor lighting and not signs. And both the building commissioner and town council have said that it was just inadvertent when it got edited in 2016. It wasn't intentional.
Okay, so the reason I was asking is because the definition I'm finding for nuisance is it involves two components: light, trespass, and glare. And we just said both of those are already in zoning. So nuisance is already defined in zoning because nuisance is a combination of light, trespass, and or glare.
In our zoning, or just you're saying?
No, I'm looking at a Webster's thing, right?
Right. So I think we just have to ignore that and
Right, but
understand that.
we define nuisance, the unreasonable, unwarranted, or unlawful use of property or some combination thereof which causes inconvenience, disruption of enjoyment, or damage to others, either to individuals, the general public, or both.
Yeah. And all I'm suggesting is that the building commissioner, whichever agent, I think he's wanted a designee, goes to make the investigation, can sort of say, here's the list, but the two things that actually create a nuisance are light, trespass, and glare, which we don't say here, but you get at it in the wording that's there now. So it's a fairly simple, is there light, trespass, and is there glare? If there is, then there's potentially a nuisance. If there's not a nuisance.
But light, trespass, and glare aren't supposed to be regulated under the general bylaw. They're only supposed to be so it's like this is where we hit the rocks back in the fall. David Trevette.
I know this will not be a popular statement, but if and when we do sit down to talk about the general bylaw proposal, I'm actually going to suggest a wording change because as you know, I think that the town will never get around, except in a few instances, of creating pedestrian-friendly lighting, and therefore I do not want something that prohibits residential or commercial lighting from falling on any street or sidewalk. And that's what it says. It says it should not fall on any street. No
Right.
direct light on any
right,
street, and I would take out that word, any street.
Right, and that's just the zoning that you're talking about, the zoning proposal.
That's the zoning.
Right. And we can maybe try to get to that tomorrow. My simple view is it's been in the bylaw for decades, don't change it. But we will debate that. All right. Okay, I'm feeling grateful to staff for sticking with this for so many hours in the evening, and I'd like to let you guys free, but I do think we definitely need to address, and I don't want to drag you back here tomorrow. So let's see if in a few minutes we can get your views on Giles and Murphy's suggestions. And if you want to just take the floor and rather than going one by one through them and extemporize or start the conversation, that's fine.
Okay, I think probably most of the comments relate to the comment that is comment number 40, which is adding language that outdoor lighting shall not be permitted on any town of Brookline property that's identified in the town's open space and recreation plan or conservation bylaw as a sanctuary, passive park, water resource area, or wildlife habitat, or on town property adjoining such areas. And I think that at minimum needs some clarification, and also while passive parks, when we think of that, people often think of example Dane Park, which is on south side of Brookline near the Municipal Service Center and pretty close to the golf course. We also have many passive parks, small parks that are in North Brookline. So Nivet Park and St. Mark's, and even the lot outside Town Hall that are considered in the open space plan under that definition. And so I think that needs some better clarification on the intention versus the impact there, because some of those are heavily trafficked pedestrian and bike corridors and do have pedestrian scale lighting associated with that. Similarly, for water resource areas, I think that what it's not called out specifically, but I'm assuming that they're referring to mapped wetlands and FEMA flood zones. And it's again not clear what that means for a park like Lars Anderson Park that has a lagoon in it, or the Emerald Necklace. And both of those have or are considering some pedestrian scale lighting, or like I said, already have that. So, and then I think the other piece is around the wildlife habitat, and I think by conservation bylaw mentioned, they're referring to the Brookline Wetlands Protection Bylaw, and that only jurisdictionally covers wetlands and wetland buffer zones. So there's not a world that I can imagine where our Conservation Commission would ever permit lighting in our conservation areas, and any such change would have to be approved by them. But resource areas specifically refers to a defined wetland resource area, and the bylaw is only concerns wildlife habitat values within those resource areas or buffer zones. So I think, again, some clarification needed there. And then there's reference to wildlife habitat as well, which is we refer to in the open space and recreation plan, but we don't have that as a categorized feature in the inventory of assets. So there's not a specific wildlife habitat map for us to point to and say, here is the areas of greatest concern. And so I think I'm presuming that the intention there is that we're following wetland resource areas and their buffer zones that support a wildlife habitat. But and I think you could make an easy argument for the sanctuaries, but anyway, there's no official designation. So again, some ambiguity there. So again, I think we didn't see Jocelyn's comments until after we had submitted other comments. So I'm happy to write that up because I just word vomited a lot at you. But I think that there's probably some clarification and nuance to that language that needs to be looked at.
Alexander, did you have a chance to see Jane Flanagan's and Debbie H's comments? Because they also focused on wetlands. Those just came in today, so you might not have seen them. I have them here in like my version of the document, which they were at a little bit late, but so yeah, so there, and I think they're both on this call, so maybe they could chime in and expand on their concerns, but they are looking for language that would align with the protection of wildlife in wetland areas, and certainly knowing the impact that artificial light at night has on wildlife, that would include not allowing light. And I think here there are wetlands areas within the golf course. So
there are definitely.
Yeah.
So I think it comes back, Elisa, to that question of wildlife habitat areas, and are we referring to just what's deemed a wetland or a wetland buffer zone, or is there some other larger definition that's being pulled upon there? And any change within a wetland, a buffer zone, or a sanctuary would trigger an automatic review by the Conservation Commission. So that would have to occur.
Right, but I guess the question is how, at least as I read these comments, how because they're both also talking about adjoining lands, is how big is that buffer zone? Because if you have a wetlands area and and then you have this brightly lit athletic field, which, as we just discussed, they're going to be lit more brightly than than 3,000 K, what's the impact on that wetland zone, or even, you know, for the golf course per se, the golf course, I believe, is identified as a migratory bird flyway, right? So that wasn't called out specifically in these comments, but I think Jane and Debbie are both on the call. Could one of you maybe expand on your comments that you sent in?
Hey, this is Jane Flanagan. Sorry, I was driving, so I had to pull over. But the comments that we sent in were first. I think one of the things that we were clarifying is the actual existing park and rec regulations, which of dawn to dusk and whatnot. So that was one of the pieces. But then also definitely discussing the idea of passive parks. And Jane Park is a good example, but there's several throughout. Brookline, Griggs Park. I was just on the design review committee for that. They have a wetland in there. And so that is, you know, Hall's Pond is a great example. The golf course is a good example because throughout the open space plan, it does talk about the wildlife habitat. And in fact, that's actually in many of the things around the open space plan saying, you know, that a goal is to increase the habitat and the enjoyment in that regard. So there is a lot of, you know, question marks, you know, and also the skyline abuts Lost Pond. So I think a lot of these do happen to be in South Brookline, but that doesn't mean they're only in South Brookline. And Alexandra, I'm sure you know where they are probably even better than I do, but I do think it does raise the question of what is light that is actually disruptive to things like the migratory bird paths, like the habitat that we're, you know, touting on one hand in the open space plan, but then actually interfering with it in another. So, or potentially if we extend lighting. So I think it's something I think this bylaw ideally would address and just use the language that I was like, we looked at the wetland protection, and that certainly does provide some language. But I also think our open space plan and all of those places, as you mentioned, are under the Conservation Commission. And you know, on one hand, I thought, you know, it might be good to mention, you know, land under the Conservation Commission. But, you know, it does depend on who's on the Conservation Commission. And I'm not putting anyone down, but I just want to make sure that we don't make it people dependent, but make it bylaw worthy, so that it's not people dependent, but it actually has some, you know, meat on the bone in that regard. So I hope that clarifies what our intent was. And if you have other questions, please let me know.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Jane. Appreciate that. And I think both from what you said, and then I just took a quick skim of what you submitted and what I saw from Jocelyn as well. I understand the intention there. I think just some of the language that's being referred to in terms of wildlife habitat and, you know, water resource areas, buffer zones. I think it's going to need some clarification on what we're referring to there and what we mean by that. Because while the phrase wildlife habitat is utilized countless times in the open space and recreation plan, we don't necessarily have a specific definition for it, and we certainly don't have designated areas that we would say this is definitely considered a wildlife habitat designation. So I think we just need to decide how we are defining that and with the applicability of it. And then I think similarly for the neighboring properties, is it for the entire property or just the part of the property where there's within the buffer zone of a wetland on the adjacent property? So I think it's all just clarifications. That's what I'm saying.
And I would agree with that, Alexandra. My intent wasn't to have the clearest language, if you know what I'm saying, because I know I'm not able, you know, I leave that to the committee to sort of wordsmith and to figure that out. But there are these sensitive areas, and I will use Dane Park as an example. That is actually where, as you know, Autumn Talent used to do the owl walk, and you know, over the years, we've still tried to do it, but there's been no owls in Dane Park because of the lighting, and some of that's in your earlier minute meetings showing the lighting that's in there, but it's also coming in from a private school, Boston College, now that has the Pine Manor site. And so, you know, so I agree with what you're saying, because what is that trespass? How close do you have to be to have that trespass? And it does impact what's happening in that park. That is one example that I'm very familiar with. But obviously I'm very familiar with much of South Brookline, but I know just being on Griggs, you know, the people that were involved in that meeting. And I think we had about 70 people for every meeting talking about the wetlands and the sensitivity of that and how important it was to preserve that. So I know, and I certainly know Halls Pond, I'm friends of Halls Pond. I know that's something that people are obviously very committed to. I know that there's other spaces as well. And I just would like us to make sure that we probably do define that. What do we mean by that? And then how do we actually protect that? So thank you for your question or comment there, Alexandra, because it helps me to clarify. Thank you.
So this may be an inappropriate request, so forgive me and feel free to tell me, no, that you should not be asking for that. But I'm wondering, Alexandra, since you seem to have maybe, I don't know that anyone on the committee has the depth of knowledge that you do about the terminology that is used. Like, do you think that you could help us try to come up with language for this specific issue, knowing what is defined and what's not defined and kind of what the interest is?
I can happy to try, absolutely. I won't be able to do that by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
No, because it's not reasonable to expect you to do it by tomorrow. I already put
Tomorrow
out
at 9 a.m.
I put out a doodle poll this afternoon to the committee looking to hopefully reconvene a meeting the week of the 10th and a meeting the week of the Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, the week of the August 31st or whatever, which squeaks us. Hopefully then we actually have a final draft to vote, because the deadline for the warrant is, I think, noon on Thursday, the 3rd of September. So we're going to try tomorrow night. My hope is to really pare down the commentary and, as much as possible, sort of incorporate and have the committee decide what it wants to put forward. So it's a simpler document, and have the committee even do a preliminary vote tomorrow on as much as we can resolve. But I think there's going to be work all month to keep this, keep refining this.
Of course, happy to help however I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've put a pin on a kind of a very specific question, which is simply, where do you draw the boundary? And it also gets to a kind of a jurisdictional question, which I don't think this committee wants to get in the middle of conservation and Parks and Rec, and conservation having clear jurisdiction over wetlands and buffer zones, and not necessarily jurisdiction over other lands. But light pollution isn't something that particularly, it doesn't respect boundaries very well. And so then how do you deal with enforcement and whatever? And then we also have this kind of one hand tied behind our back for this whole effort, because this general bylaw does not regulate trespass. So we're also just trying to navigate that, thread that needle, and do a dark sky bylaw that's about, protecting wildlife and human health and energy conservation and all these other things that we've gotten, sort of a nod from town council that those things are appropriate to regulate in a bylaw. Just to remind us, because it's in our previous minutes, but another thing that town council pointed out that makes a general bylaw about regulating lighting appropriate is that nuisance is appropriately regulated in a general bylaw as opposed to in zoning. So it's not that we're in the wrong place, but we do have this limitation. All right, I think it's after 9:30. We have another meeting starting at 7 o'clock tomorrow night to pick this up. I want to open it up. We have been joined by Jocelyn Murphy at the last minute. So Jocelyn, if you would like to make public comment or join us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, those are both opportunities. And then I just do want to hear from committee members if they want to make any more, say anything else, particularly about what we've just been talking about.
Hi, this is Jocelyn Murphy, town meeting member in precinct 16. Thank you, David. I missed most of the meeting because I had another commitment. So I'll reserve my comments until tomorrow, if that's okay.
Great, thank you. Anyone else, or are we done?
I guess I'll just very briefly chime in. I do hope that we can find a way to, define some protections for these, however we end up defining wildlife habitat. Because I think that, I think that it's something that that I believe I've heard from other Brookline residents is important. We're saying it's an important objective. And so I hope that we can find a way to kind of thread the needle here with keeping things simple, but at the same time, not forgetting that, one of our constituents here is a group that can't vote, which is wildlife.
And on that, I'm curious how people on the committee feel about, I'll call it, naturally occurring wildlife areas. Like there's a pocket of coyotes who lives in a dark forested area just behind Filbert Green. It's not a park. It's between residential homes, but wildlife lives there, all kinds actually. Short of drawing a map, and I don't think we want to do that. We've been very general and trying to resist getting into that level of granularity. Short of drawing a map, do we have to name the things that we're trying to protect as designated wildlife sanctuaries or habitats? I fear going too general is going to start to allow things that they're just harboring animals to be called wildlife habitat, which they are, but that is not where we started our efforts in terms of a blanket over the entire town.
I want to also raise the possibility, and Jane Flanagan expressed concerns about this a few minutes ago, but that I'm not sure where our language is in terms of construction about other bylaw, other authorities in town and everything, but I think that there's a role in this regard, not that this bylaw shouldn't step up and do its part, but I think there's definitely a role for the Parks and Rec Commission and the Conservation Commission to establish policies that enforce this. And I just wonder if there's also an opportunity for the bylaw to kind of do a shout out on that and somehow acknowledge or suggest that this bylaw in no way limits those authorities over town lands, open space lands, to make their own rules. That would be more limiting potentially. Julie?
I think that's an interesting approach, David. And I was just going to say in response to Matt that I think the reason we've spent a lot of time tonight, given the attendance of staff, talking about town land, but I think the reason that we've all been trying to be so thoughtful about how all of this will apply to residential and commercial areas is because of exactly what he's talking about there, which we're obviously not going to name every area, where there might be wildlife, but I think that's the overall goal, is that if we have the right policies in place, that the types of areas that he's describing, would receive at least a better degree of protection than they have now.
Just a quick comment, David, on what you just said. I will note that for example, in Newton, the Conservation Commission does, at their discretion, put in to the order of conditions for a project additional requirements around dark sky compliance, wildlife habitat sensitivity, and things like that. So there is some precedent for something like that to occur. And I think that's something that could also be considered as another avenue for protections through each individual permit that's reviewed by Concom.
Okay, well, we accomplished a lot tonight. We're not ready to submit to the to the warrant quite yet. I will see everyone at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, I hope. Thank you to staff. your participation and care is deeply appreciated. Also, thank you to the public, and thank you to this committee that is, showing up and doing the work and really quite enthusiastic about it. This is hard work, but it's, for me, very enjoyable. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
See you tomorrow.
you.
Bye-bye.